love grasses. And we're all attracted, we love gardens and we like things that flower and bloom, but there's also the texture and there's wonderful elements to our landscapes that only grasses can provide. And so what I thought I'd do tonight is talk a little bit about introduction to grasses. And if you're like me, I was looking through so many of the nursery lists, and the nursery list will include things like you see carex and you see juncus with the grasses. How many people have noticed that? Okay. And those are great things, and they can fill in for grasses in some places, but I'll tell you what the differences are between those in terms that don't take more than 3 sentences. Yes, you are more than welcome. Okay. A little bit about the fossil record. So there's kind of if you get a paleobotanist, you got to let us do our thing a little bit. And then also, we're talking about landscapes and natives. All of our native plants have a rich history that goes back in time. And I always like to share a little bit about that. And then 10 grasses I selected. Now, what I like to do is, I know that, how many of you remember the David Letterman show? Most of you. And here are top 10 lists. I couldn't get somebody to do the top 10 list tonight, but I thought I would pick 10 grasses that give us unique stories and things that we can talk about. And then when you're at the end, you can say, well, why don't you include that one? I teach a plant class called 10 Plants That Change the World. So, the list always changes. Okay. And then just talk a little bit about what you're doing, because frankly, we need native plant groups. We need folks like the University of Georgia Extension. We need the people that are in the Georgia Botanical Society, because I personally believe we really, really need all of the boots on the ground, the grassroots effort when it comes to plants. Okay, we need everybody. And the people that know the most about plants are the people who are spending the most time going out in the field and looking at plants. And to be honest, here's a little secret. There's 2 important secrets. One secret is if you have a PhD and the floor is flooding from the toilet, you're not the smartest person. The person that fixes the toilet is the smartest person, okay? But the second one is the people who have the deepest knowledge about plants are the people who spend time and are out in the field with them for a while. It's that person that goes out that has had a family that has had, I'm thinking of where I'm at in Georgia, just up the road in Eatonton and Putnam County. It's that generations of dairy farmers that know the plants. They know, they have that experience, that connection. It's deep knowledge. And so there's difference between deep knowledge and what I call geek knowledge. Okay. And so the people who spend the most time, that see the most plants, are the people that know the most about plants. And we have a lot of people in chapters of the Native Plant Society across Georgia that just are a tremendous wealth of information and know things that I don't, because I don't get the chance to have as much fun and go out in the field as much as many of you do. All right. So the grass family is the 4th largest plant family. Just out of curiosity, what is the largest plant family? Anybody know? Or just take a wild guess. What? Asters, the Asteraceae, okay? Well, and I'll tell you, there's a little bit of a debate that's going on, a little bit of a, no pun intended, a turf war that goes on between people who study the sunflower family and the orchid family. So for monocots, you have this group, the orchids of the orchid family, and they're super diverse, and then you have the sunflower. So my background was I studied paleobotany, and then I worked with somebody who was an expert in that family. So I studied the sunflower family a lot. So that's one of the families that's near and dear to me. But when I look at utility, I can't think of any, without grasses, where would we have been as groups? We talk about where would we have been if people and wolves never would have connected? What would have happened if people and grasses never would have connected? Think about all of the connections, the deep knowledge and the connections we have with this one family. And they grow everywhere, including Antarctica. So they're on all 7 continents. That's pretty good. Orchids definitely don't have a run-in on that one. Same with the sunflower family. And every kind of habitat you can imagine, terrestrial habitat, they're there. And of course, in the southeast, we have about 1,400 native grass species. They're amazing. All right, I promise I'm not going to overdo this, all right? But just to give you a handle about a little bit about grass forms, anatomy. No, there's not a quiz at the end, and you don't have to memorize these, okay? You're not getting a vocabulary list. But what I'd like you to do is look at 3 things that are essential about the vegetative part of the grass. You have the underground rhizomes, but if you look at the stem, which is the culm, you'll notice that the leaf has 2 parts, okay? One part of the leaf hugs the stem, and the other part is the part that sticks out, that makes up the blade. So you have a sheath and a blade that make up the leaf, okay? So this is an important feature, and the reason I bring this is people send me stuff and say, there's a reason behind doing this. One is, if you have grasses that you want to send me to identify, what I want you to do is always include parts of that leaf so that I can see the part of the leaf that right here that wraps around the stem. And here's the part, the blade that's free. And there's this area right in here that you notice has these odd ornamentations. Sometimes it's hair, sometimes it looks like a little tuft of tissue that's sticking out. It's called a ligule. So to identify some of the grasses, if you have a grass that you send me, make sure you get the ones that I can see the ligule, all right? Because that's what we need to identify them. The other thing we need to identify them is actually to have the fruits or florets. So grasses, they have flowers, but they're really, really reduced. You know, the petals and the sepals are reduced to little nubs. And if you think about it, if you're wind pollinated, it's not really great to have petals or sepals around your anthers. You want to let it all hang out. You know, we want some free love and pollination going on. You need to have those sticking out, so that the pollen can easily be transported in the wind, as you can see here. And so here is a cluster. Each one of these is a flower covered by 2 little specialized leaf structures. Let's just call them that. All right. So here is a whole cluster of these. So this is one of these. And then what we look at are the florets. Okay. And it looks like they're difficult to ID, but they're not that hard. If you sit down and just take the pieces, start at the bottom, and take all the pieces off, you can deconstruct it and key it out. So if you have grasses, if you're out in the field and you have grass that you find and you want to identify, if you collect it and collect this material, I'll be more than happy to help you out with the ID. Okay. So, and I'm good at that. I'll be happy to do that for you. All right. What's not a grass? As mentioned, a lot of nurseries, I see they have carex in there. Juncus, how many of you, is anybody in here using, was it Juncus diffusus in any of your landscaping? That's a real common, that's been used quite a bit, I've noticed, at least in our neck of the woods in Milledgeville. In fact, we have a new science building and it's all up in the front that they've used it. Rush, it's just a rush. And so this is the rush right here. It looks like think of it as a lily. You know, you have the 6 petals or tepals of the lily. Think of it as being little tiny lily. Then instead of having bright, big, showy tepals or petals, they're like little membraceous things. Okay, and so this is something that you'll see in lists that's not a grass, but is used in landscape. Sedges, carex. I've noticed, how many of you have seen carex on lists? Carex is there, yeah. So the way that you can tell this is one from a grass is think of it as a flower in a baggie. Literally. So there is, you see right here, this is the stigma sticking out. Well, there's a leaf-like bag that surrounds the entire flower. And the other thing too is, for some of you, if you remember the saying, sedges have edges. So you often have those 3-sided stems. So again, this is something else that shows up. And then we have all these other things. We have bulrushes, and how many of you nutgrass? Yeah, so things that are in the cypress family, you know, nutgrass, that has to be like, that's in the running, I believe, for one of the world's most invasive plants. It's also mentioned in Flannery O'Connor. She's our home girl up in Milledgeville. You might have heard of her. So there's this about picking the nutgrass out of the yard. So again, but you know, so how many times have you also seen papyrus? Papyrus is in this family, the cyperus family, Cyperaceae, and that's one that you commonly see as definitely not a native, but is often used in landscaping. All right, so I told you that I admitted I came clean and said I was a paleobotanist. Okay, we're not like Laura Dern. My pals that study insects and fossil mammals did this diagram. This is what Washington State, upland Washington State looked like about 50 million years ago. So there's this thing related to a hedgehog, a tapir-like thing. And my buddy Bruce Archibald, okay, I love this. He does fossil insects. Wouldn't you know, I mean, you've seen lacewings? I mean, who ever sees a lacewing that big? His fossil ones aren't even that big. You know, and the dragonfly and everything. And then you look at the plants and it's like, okay, well, let's just put a few of the plants in. So I've often wondered what the plants and the animals are like and how they interact. And so what we do to kind of understand that is, besides studying the fossil plants, look for a place where you find big animals in mountains, in warm climates. And so the place is the Virunga Mountains, where you're most familiar with mountain gorillas. But these are some of my favorite, on Cape buffalo, the buffalo that come up into the mountains. You also have elephants. So you don't have a tropical forest that's just all forest. It's a passageways. It's a set of mazes practically of game trails. And those are the game trails that that guerrilla tourism use, that they take people out, they follow the game trails. And if you notice, there's these areas like this. And so I worked with a University of Rwanda student and a colleague in the FOSSI Fund, and we looked to see what groups of grasses these guys were mainly eating. Were they eating the C3 grasses, the C4, which they're different types of photosynthesis, or were they eating sedges and rushes? So guess what they were eating mostly up in the mountains? What? They were actually eating the more of the things in the Cyperaceae, the sedges and stuff. But they come in and they trample and they create their own little wetland up there. And so the relationship with animals and the relationship with the anatomy is really interesting, and particularly teeth. And so there's a vertebrate paleontologist, Bruce McFadden, at the University of Florida. You know, that school that begins with F that's south of here? Okay. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say that in this room. I hope it's not bugged. But you notice that all of the different kinds of animals had a major shift in their teeth when habitats opened up, when you started to have savannas. So here, you know, you're looking around 17, 18 million years ago. Savanna, prairies. All of a sudden, you have this big change where you have, you know, your teeth are what we would call brachiodont. They're short. And then these horses and others, they have these longer teeth. And when you eat grasses, you have silica that's in the cells and it wears the teeth. And so when grasses started to take over, we can see that the animals immediately responded, particularly by some of the ways they use their teeth. And you can actually identify the silica in the leaves actually gets preserved in the fossil record. So Carolyn Stromberg, who's at the University of Washington over there, has actually found out and looked and traced when you had open habitats, when we started to have grasses, by when you start to see these in the fossil record. And so you can see it was just all of a sudden, when there was open habitat, grasses just took over. It opened up a whole new world for these odd plants that were stuck in these little habitats. And then all of a sudden, when it opened up, grasses took over the world. It's a climate shifting when you started to have the variable climate. You know, it's interesting how continent position and ocean currents and atmospheric circulation, the way that's all linked and how it all changes in time and how long it took for climates to change after you separated all the continents. So it's fascinating. But all of a sudden, here was this group of plants, this family, maybe a few of them in the fossil record, but then all of a sudden, when you had the habitats open, they just took over. And that's a great story. Carolyn Stromberg tells some really wonderful stories. Well, I mean, tells stories, but you know, the work she's doing and what she's been able to dig out and histories of what has happened in grasslands through time. It's really fascinating stuff. Okay, what you all been waiting for. Let's go through our top 10 list. All right. Arundinaria. In plain English, it's cane. And Arundinaria is the only genus of temperate bamboos in North America. And you know why I picked this one kind of starting out? Look here in North Georgia. We have all the species come together in North Georgia. So this is like the place where we have the canes coming into North Georgia. And of course, they're incredible habitats. I mean, think of the amount of birding, reptiles, the animals, the wealth of biodiversity they're associated with these areas that we call cane breaks. And of course, for selfish reasons, I started out here because it's a logical connection with bamboo. So we find in the same place in Washington State 50 million years ago, we've discovered bamboo. And so here's what's great, kind of funny. I had my plant anatomy and morphology class, and I had a pair of twins in there. Well, twins always come in a pair. Sorry about that. But they were working with describing some parts with the bamboo and then looking at this fossil. So they took this fossil portion right here, which is like part of the culm and all of the, where you have the leaves coming off and everything. You even have some of the ligule parts. And they took it and put it next to one they collected in one of the Arundinaria tectum, the one that we have in Milledgeville, it's native. They put them on the table and they were exactly the same size, like corresponding the parts. And there's kind of this cool story that goes back. The expert of bamboo in the United States is a incredible that's at Iowa State, Lynn Clark. She knows more about bamboo. You know, the person before her was somebody that was at the Smithsonian. And see, these are these people that have this rich knowledge about plants. I mean, without them, with people that know all of these groups of plants, it's so essential. And the other thing essential is they also know how essential it is, how many boots and people that you have in the ground that you work with. Lynn has a wonderful talk that you'd all appreciate. I heard her give. It's called How to Be a Yard Deviant. And the way to be a yard deviant is to let everything go au naturel and use the natives. So I'm happy to be around yard deviants. So we actually have these fossils that are bamboo. What's really weird is you didn't think about these things being new species and finding new ones. There was one from Alabama that's been fairly recently discovered. So there it is. You know, there's the details right there. And so here I say about those ligules, you know, right there. You always want to see those parts from the strings. All of the things in the bamboo as a group have this kind of a ligule. So if you look where the blade is and the culm is at, if you're wondering if it's just one of the large or grass species, you know, the number of them, just take a look and you'll see that. And of course, it's so much of our history, so much of our cultural history here is tied with these. And here are the cane breaks historically. I mean, you think about this everywhere. So think about anywhere, and I didn't do it, I almost did it. I have a neighbor that likes to pesticide everything. And he has a creek, and he does it around the creek. So you can imagine the erosional problems. And I always thought, I always want to say, why don't you go and get some plugs of our our native cane and start it here, because it stops the erosion. These guys, it's an incredible. And if you do a combination, how many of you have properties where you have a creek and then you have the sides? If you get the cane at along the creek bank, and then buy what's out there, the river oats, and have those along your banks, it's a really killer combination and really a good one to stop erosion. Oh, hey, here's the other one. Whenever I think of the start of grasses and ornamentation, ornamentals, muley grass. Everybody likes muley grass, and there's a couple different, there's 3 different species that you often see here in the southeast. Okay, one is the capillary one, just to use the common name, and then think about sweetgrass. So here is a sweetgrass habitat just outside of Savannah. And this is again, another significant thing. Here's the sweet thing about, no pun intended, about sweetgrass and on these others, is these grasses do so many important functions for erosion, for engineering, for horticultural purposes. Okay, do engineers know how to grow grasses? No, okay. Do university faculty members? No. Because some that can do it, yeah, but gradually. So when you have botanic gardens, master garden programs, all the things the extension does, having the Native Plant Society, having the Georgia Botanical Society, when you have all of these groups, when you have high school and middle school and elementary school teachers that have gardens. How many of you have worked with schools that have gardens? Yeah. This is the thing, the art of knowing, that you need this. You don't know you need this now, but you need this native plant. And you need the people that go out, that rescue, collect, save, get the seeds, and get them going. You need those people. You don't aware it, but they know this. You don't. Okay? So again, these are incredible. And again, UGA, again, at the coast. In coastal areas here we have working on, and this particular one is in Jekyll and St. Simons. And of course the sweetgrass baskets. Who has bought sweetgrass baskets? Have you read the book about the sweetgrass? Braiding grease sweet. How many people? Isn't that rock? That is the best book. Yes. And so, I mean, again, how can we not put sweetgrass on the list? I mean, that would be not a wise thing. Okay, here you go. It's Bobby Sue, right? Okay, Bobby Sue, this one's for you. All right, there we go, yes. Pick a favorite warm season grass to forage on. Okay, we have a lot of choices here, and there is a whole incredible monograph. If you want these books, if there's a book or something I cite that you want, just email me. I'll send you it as a PDF, or if not, I'll figure out how to get it to you some way or another. So there's this one about establishing native grass forages in the Southeast. These are the native plants. They've co-evolved with here. And think about how my foraging grasses have changed. Could you imagine? I've always would love to go back in time. And don't you ever think about this too? What was it like before we had the big agricultural? What was it like when we had topsoil? Yeah. So I mean, what were the native grasses then? Because I mean, you would have to have totally different ones now. I mean, it's such a different landscape and a different, Yeah. That one? What do you mean by group? Yes, it is. Oh yeah, we got to. Wait, just don't have it in your backyard and then toss the cigarette in the bush. And that's not a good idea with wiregrass. Okay. And so these are the ones that are out now. How many of you have been seeing the blue stem grasses? They're everywhere. And the thing is that by putting combinations, I've noticed in the grass and the meadow that they manage at Andalusia in Milledgeville, Connor's property, Flannery. They have combinations of some of these. They have big blue. I've seen switchgrass, big blue stem, some gamma grass. They do combinations of them, but you can see that you pick your site, whether you want wet sites, the dry sites, so you can mix and match, and even on your properties, because land is not homogeneous. You're going to have drier areas, wetter areas of your property, and you can easily pick and manage And to me, the hardest part, the thing that I would see really challenging is how do you establish these? I couldn't imagine, so I've heard switchgrass is a real bear to start. But other ones are rather easy. Little blue stem goes everywhere. I see that everywhere. It just seems to be fine on its own. And then grazing management. So again, this is a, how do you pick one? You know, it doesn't mean this is, you just can't. This doesn't have to be Sophie's choice. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. You know, it's unplowable. And you know, the other thing with these grasses too, and I didn't mention is, and for somebody like me, I'm not managing or working with them in this as a seed source. So are those awns, you know, that big pointy thing that's attached as an awn, and that's on the seed. So being able to manage and deal, and in fact, that's long on seeds, it makes it very hard for whoever's managing those seeds and treating those seeds to do that with that long awn. The other thing is, anybody out here familiar, do you have a copy of the the Georgia Extension's native grass guide? Okay, anybody seen this? Okay, send me, we'll work it out that I could get copies electronically, or I can send you a link that you can download. And I can share that link with you, and you can download. So many of the questions that you see about the grasses tonight, like what are the differences, they have a picture. They will show you that with the arrows and show you these little minute differences that, you know, when you look at it, it's like, well, it looks like a blue stem to me. But they'll point it out, and it's really handy, and it works. Last year when we did a grass workshop at Georgia College, we used it, and it worked. Yeah, put it in the newsletter because it is a great resource. All right. Okay, did anybody ever take general ecology and use the yellow book? Anybody take general ecology? Okay, so I remember getting a copy of this book. I only took one ecology course my entire life, and yet I was hired in Texas to teach it. And then the reason why I got hired there was the person who wrote the letters, which was the department chair of the plant biology department, said, I said, Ralph, you can't write a letter. And he goes, well, you took my class. And I go, yeah, it's the only ecology class I took. Yeah, but and I go, why do you? And he goes, well, Melanie, I always had you go over there and TA because you could pretend to be a zoologist and get away with it with the people. So, and you did geology, so just go flow with it. I'll write you a letter of recommendation. Got hired. But when I thought of ecology, I thought of Gene Odom, you know, the father of ecology. That's probably one of the greatest Georgians. And I never met Odom, but I saw him get the boot at Camden Park in Baltimore. This is a true story. So it's 1997. I'm at the Botanical Society of America meeting, and the Ecological Society of America were meeting together there. And I'm with a friend who's like, starts nudging me. He goes, look, does that guy know what they're doing? Do they know what they're doing? I was like, what do you mean? He goes, look at that. They have two cops and they're taking Eugene Odom out of the ballpark. He wanted to just eat his dinner and find a place to eat his dinner and sit down instead of standing. And so he just went up into the stands to eat his dinner. And so they gave him the boot. So one of the greatest ecologists that we've ever had in our country or anywhere, you know, got evicted. I really hope that the Baltimore Orioles get a curse for the rest of that, for that. I hope that they lose to the Phillies. So I always think of Eugene, and of course, Spartina. Have you noticed that Spartina, now we have fashion. There's Spartina fashion purses. It's a boutique names with Spartina. You know, and it's one of these grasses that, I mean, can you imagine, you know, standing on the main line and then you look and there's the Sea of Spartina. and watching people who have gone shrimping come in, or boats that come in just to the dock to sell you shrimp, you know, in these areas. And it's to see us, I mean, to me, it's fascinating. It's just, to me, to see that this habitat that we have in Georgia and the Carolinas. But the thing is this is such an important ecosystem function that this grass does. Nutrient cycling, baffling, restoration. And so all of us in the room, how many of you are tired of taking care of Japanese privet? There's Chinese privet too, right? Yeah, okay. Want to get even about Chinese privet? You send them cordgrass, you send them our Spartina, because it has been on the list in China and also in the Pacific Northwest, because it's such a great function in grass. I mean, think about it. You have somebody like Eugene Odom, you have all of this work that's been done about it, and all of the important functions that people were getting it and introducing it. And so it became invasive. So people in Vancouver are not happy. So you have to put Spartina on there, definitely, as one of them. All right, hey, for Kansas, a little bit further north. You didn't have sod busting in Kansas, right? You had to go up to furthermore to, where's Ed? Yeah, you had to go further enough into Nebraska and those areas, right? But native buffalo grass. And so, you know, think about grass. When we talk about grass, grass is protecting it from erosion, wind erosion. Buffalo grass is a classic one that was always great for wind erosion and sod busting. And this is one that you can do in Georgia. This is one that's recommended in Georgia for lawns. It's low maintenance, it's pretty drought tolerant. You notice we want things that are drought tolerant. Have you noticed stuff with climate change? People talk about this climate change. When I was an undergraduate in geology, we talked about it all the time, like it was a fact. But so I got it right. It is, okay. So all of the drought and warm weather native plants, think about it. If you want something to fill in, you have to go back into nature to find it, right? If you want to find the plants that are going to be the best drought resistors, you need people out there looking at plants, collecting plants, when they rescue plants, thinking about it. Okay, this tolerates drought, this tolerates heated environments. You want to collect these things. You want to bring in new things into cultivation. You know, we talk about having crops that shift. You know, when's the last time we've had a lot of peaches in Georgia? Yeah. So the question becomes, so what should we pick as our next crop? So the same thing when it comes from landscape and managing and things, because as somebody that is an evolutionary biologist, if I can play that card, I have been teaching it for years. Evolution can keep pace, but it can't keep pace with the change that we have now. And so unless you have some human intervention, we caused it, so we can also have a job with addressing it and adapting it by pulling in more plants and picking crops and plants that we can increase either their range, you know, things that are more southerly in these climates that would naturally migrate, help them migrate more, and also, you know, picking and bringing in new things in different environments that are matching what ours are becoming, if that makes sense. So there's a very, very important role that's looking at native plants, going out into the world and collecting and bringing in plants that are natives to cultivate. That's so important. And buffalo grass is a great one. I tossed this one in. I thought about it, and I thought wild rice. And we're not talking about the rice. From my understanding, is there anybody here who's very knowledgeable about the history of Savannah? Okay, I never took Georgia history. But from my understanding is that if we would have gone back in time before you would have seen a cypress swamp in the areas around Savannah. And of course, then that was all modified when rice was brought in. But we did have native rice. And wetlands. Of course, this is a plant that's associated with wetlands. And we think about the history of wetlands is so tied up with so many things like sea level changes and glaciations and meltwater. And it's like you look at it and you can just see, you imagine how these different, the St. Lawrence Seaway, St. Lawrence and Great Lakes regions, the coastal ranges, and then you notice in here, there's these areas here, these uplands, you don't have habits. And you think about it, if you need to get some good quality loaded carbs from a seed, well, if you have to grow in water and you have to have enough energy, have enough sugars and things to load up that little embryo so it can make it all the way up through the water, think about it. Great big grains of rice, that's going to be a lot of food source for any embryo that's grown in an aquatic. So rice is a big food source. It's going to be a big food source. And then I just had to throw this one in, is that origins. One of the things is I teach a plant course in times in the Bahamas. And so we talk about the origin of plants from taken people and being able to trace plants. What were plants that actually came from West Africa? What were plants that came from gardens that were in Andalusia, not Andalusia in Milledgeville, but Andalusia in Spain, these Moor gardens, the collections of plants. Those were gardens that the plants were brought in later to cultivate, to be brought into gardens throughout Europe. People went everywhere. So tracing plants gets to be so convoluted because people had all these convoluted pathways. But oftentimes, one of the props that we have had that has come in is we do have West African rice that had come in, and it was also in with the rice that was, that you typically think of that was cultivated in rice system, rice farms, rice plantations, as they say, in coastal Georgia, Carolinas. So people bring their plants with them. So some invasive plants came with people with an interesting history. Things like pecans. I mean, who would ever think that the Latin binomial would include the name Illinois in a pecan, okay? So that tells you that, up the Mississippi, people would put the indigenous people would stick those nuts in their pockets and brought them with them all the way up into so. All right, I have to put this one in. Sea oats. So we've already taken care of our barrier islands are a gem, our golden isles. I mean, most people when they come to Georgia, to me, they talk about the Georgia mountains. I'm personally, and I'm not being patronizing, but I am more of a mountain person than I am a coastal person, okay? But for people that talk about and think about Georgia, they love the coast and talk about the Golden Isles and our barrier islands. And now with sea level changes and ups and downs and where's inundation, managing these areas is really, really difficult. It really is. And maintaining them is significant because, it is protection. That's the nice thing about the Georgia coast. You have a barrier island and you have a Spartina marsh, but it's not that little, as you all well know. Okay, so we have great protected coasts, and we want to keep it that way. And so these dunes, if you want to maintain a good dune, is you want to carefully select a suite of plants that will help stabilize the dune. And so sea oats are really, really important ones. And of course, these are going to have different, in a dune, there's a lot of little microhabitats. So that you can see that there's different zones in a dune where you're going to maintain them by picking particular plants. And grasses are great because they have these big rhizomes. And you could imagine if you would, and it's more than just the surface. If you would probably cut away a dune like this, what you would find is layers and layers of old rhizomes, old beds. So the framework, even after the plant is dead, is helping to contribute to stabilize a dune. So stabilizing dunes is just such an important function. All right, yeah, I had to put it up. I think these are gorgeous. This is one of my favorites. Okay. There they are. Sorry, I'll go back. So these are really great And the Georgia Department of Transportation loves them so much. They're one of their poster children and favorites in their grassing program, which means dealing with slopes. I don't know about you, but I drive around, I have more fun looking. It's like, what do they have on their slopes? And I mean, there's the geology part of me that I really like the rock outcrops. So please keep the plants off those. But the other things I really like are when you look and see what they're working with the slopes. And you can have all these choices. And so again, I can also find this for you if somebody would like this particular document. Again, you can have the mixes of cool seasonal grasses and warm seasonal grasses here. And the zones, the dates to plant. And of course, we have in there, where is it? It's hiding on me. Right here, river oats. So October 31st to the planting dates there. I was out and I saw beautiful patches. You know, usually it's supposed to be a cool season grass. How many of you have seen it in warm season? Is it just me, or have you been seeing this out and about in warm season, which surprises me, because there's beautiful populations of it in Andalusia, where the Flannery Connor property, their old farm, and it's in the deep ravine, you know, and they're doing fantastic. But it's last year the cane was doing great in the winter, and now this year it's not. But then again, that's one that's supposed to be active in the spring. So it's interesting. There we go. Here's the wiregrass. Told you had to have the wiregrass in. So, you know, we get down to places, the Okefenokee Swamp, get around further out into the longleaf pine, the savannas, the sandhills. These are the areas where, most importantly, you have to have a fire regime. You have to have fire to make these plant communities function, work, and to be maintained. And of course, here is your friend, your wiregrass and palmetto. So an extremely, extremely important. And does anybody ever use this grass? You're not going to use it around here. And some people say about using it as an ornamental, and I think, okay, the last thing I want is an ornamental around my house, even though it's native, is one that's fire resistant, you know, because, you know, if the person shows up, if the pest guy shows up and flicks a cigarette in, that's not too good. Or if I'm barbecuing and there's a breeze, that's not too good either. But again, this is a grass that it needs to fire. It's not going to be able to function. It's not going to be able to be maintained itself without that fire regiment. All right, this is not a grass, all right, but this is somebody that I thought is really remarkable nurseryman, Tony Avent. And I look at this, I mean, this guy's unreal. Has anybody ever gone to his place? It's called Nature's Delight. What? It's lovely. You've gone there in Raleigh, and then gone to the Ralston Arboretum as well. I mean, and he's knowledgeable. He's somebody, you know, as somebody that's just, I think, you know, was just crawled out of the womb and just instantly went out and started collecting and establishing plants. It's a gift. It's a native. It's something that you can't teach. It's a knowledge or a sense. You know, we talk about plant blindness, and that is we forget how closely we are connected with plants. And I swear people have this, and I swear there's things about plants and human connections. We talk about animals, but we never talk a lot about the plant and human connections, how deep they can be. So for instance, in the Bahamas, we go out, little San Salvador Island in the middle of nowhere. So from 1800s to about now, people were left on their own device until maybe the 1940s, 1950s. Naval base was established there. You didn't have a medical clinic. You didn't have a doctor. You didn't have a lot of ships coming from Nassau there. You had people who practiced bush medicine. And there, at one point, about 10 years ago, all 5 of the people that were the bush medicine experts were all alive. And so they had a team that came in, and it was folks that were in the health field, and they interviewed them. And they would say, well, Mr. Forbes, where did you learn how to collect this plant and put this in this tea? Why did you include, why did you put black torch in there? And he goes, well, my mom told me. I said, yeah, okay, yeah, your mom was the midwife on the island. But who, from a grandma? Okay, from grandma. Yeah, but where did she find? Because by that point, well, in a dream. And the thing is if you go anywhere in the world and you start asking that question, it ends with a dream. The indigenous people. But here's the other weird one. So Mr. Forbes would tell the story about, he goes, Melanie, one day he'd say, Melanie, he says, you got your coffee? Yes, I will. Have some bush tea. And he goes, Melanie, let me tell you, my mom said, Bartram, this is coffee. Your first cup of coffee, your last cup of coffee, only bush tea. And that would be the only thing that we would have. And he goes, but let me tell you something. I said, well, how did you learn how to use that plant right there? And he goes, oh, yeah. He goes, I had to refine that. And I said, well, Bartram, Mr. Forbes, I always call him Mr. Forbes because I always told my students he was the best botanist on the island. And he would say, well, let me tell you this. He goes, I needed this plant, and I couldn't remember where it was at, but I went to bed and I had a dream. And in my dream, I saw my grandmother standing by Pigeon Creek, and by Pigeon Creek, there was the plant. And he goes, I went to Pigeon Creek and got the plant. So there's this deep knowledge. There's something in our mind, in our awareness and things that connects us very closely to plants. And I never believed this, because I was a smart aleck. But then you start talking to people and you realize how deep the knowledge is, this deep knowledge of people that use plants, that are connected with plants, that are around plants. They're not sitting in like an academic building like I am, but they have used plants all their life and have a connection with them that is extraordinary. And this guy is just amazing. And so I thought, well, what about the last one? Well, why not tridents? Okay, what would Tony say? Well, why not tridents? And again, looking at this, he's taken a plant into Carolinas that's from Texas, a group, and again, it's putting in something again that can tolerate sun and it can tolerate dry conditions. So going out, the combination that is happening with native plant societies, master gardeners, the University of Georgia Extension, all of these groups that come together, and then connecting with nurseries. People with nurseries are doing the Lord's work, as we would say, because you're getting those plants out there, you're finding ways to make them available, you're collecting the seeds, you have the skills to establish, make a living at it, but also it is so essential because we really, really, really need to rethink about so much of the plants that we use in our landscapes. And we have to rethink about shifting them because, again, if we go back into native areas and if we go back and we pull plants that are the natural plants and we move them a little further north than maybe they would naturally migrate, and if we look at those populations, people who are really good nurserymen and women or people, they have that ability to go in and select individuals that are tolerant and populations that are tolerant. There's this deep knowledge and ability to collect and take lineages and to really maintain these plants and to be able to introduce them into places that they're really, really needed. And so that's why it's not the people sitting at the university that make the big differences. It's the people that are in the grassroots organizations. It's the people that are coming out to meetings like this. It's the people that are working with plant rescues, taking those plants, collecting seeds, working with nurseries, getting them cultivated, making them available. Those are the movers and shakers. And frankly, I worry on my side in the spectrum is what are we doing with training? How many times do we need somebody? We need a herbarium. We need expertise with identifying plants. Where is that? Because so often we get so hung up in evolution and molecular biology. Now, those things are great. They're fun to play with. It's fun to be able to sequence DNA, and it's magic, and it's cool to see what's related to what. That's great. However, you can get so caught up in the protocols and the statistics and getting the right perfect evolutionary tree that you forget that people need to know the plants themselves, be able to name the plants, to have the keys and resources to know the plants, and to have the expertise to be teaching the local flora classes where you say, okay, this is a taxonomic key. These are the parts you need. If you know what these parts are, you can use the key and you can identify this. It used to be we'd have 3 or 4 at Ohio State, 3 or 4 native plant classes. And, as a graduate student, I would teach one. And being able to use the keys, and I found that people that taken those classes were people in conservation, agriculture across the board. But we need that expertise, and it's the thing, bug people at universities to provide that expertise, to hire people and say, you need to teach plant taxonomy. Besides, we're in the world where we have plant databases. If you want to find information about a plant, the only way you can do it is if you have a name. And without that name, you have a problem. Here's the other thing. The Geek Squad is going to be going over to Spain by the Geek Squad. It's all the systematic botanists, plant taxonomists. And are you aware about, for botanists, the only correct name is the Latin binomial name? No, that's the deal. The only one that is the correct is the Latin binomial name. And all of the rules and applications of names and what proper names are comes under the auspices of a group called the International Association of Plant Taxonomists. And it's a vote. So you might want to, so the rules and things governing those names are voted on and reviewed every 7 years. I forget how many years it is between botanical congresses. So what the problem is, you go American Ornithological Union, they give you the list of birds, right? And you have a list of proper common names for bugs. What about everybody else who uses plant names? I'm sorry, but people with PhDs in botanists and plant taxonomists, we are not the people who are just using those names. There's a whole slew of people, everybody else that outnumbers us, that uses those names. And so it's going to be interesting. What happens when you need acceptable lists of common names? And I can see down the road sometime that the Horticultural Society will say, do we really need this? And if it gets to the point where people say, well, we should be using DNA and DNA barcoding and things like that, fingerprinting, whatever you want to call it, think Star Trek and no, I don't live in a basement and I don't go to those conventions, or even have the collection or watch it, but So there's a lot of interesting conversations that can be had between native plant societies and the users of plant names and the people that are involved with that. So when it comes to that, we have to be thankful to be here in Georgia, because the work you do, all of these programs, what you do tonight, making plants available for sale, salvaging plants, rescuing plants, when you rescue those plants, getting the seeds, partnering with nurseries, having master gardening programs, having they're running the Master Naturalist, true, right? Somewhere, they usually run that one. So all of these are very, very important. And of course, when it comes to native plants, you guys, native plant enthusiasts were far above and beyond Steve Jobs, because it said, some people say, give the customers what they want, but that's not my approach. Our job is to figure out what they are going to want before they do. We've already figured out that what people need are native plants. They don't know they want them now, but they're going to know that they're going to need them. And they're going to need them badly, because they're going to be the ones that are going to be ideal for meeting their needs. It's what people need. People need native plants. All right? And with that, if you have any questions, I think I kept it at the